Mean Girls 2024, directed by Samantha, Jayne, and Arturo Perez Jr., stars Angourie Rice and Reneé Rapp. This is an adaptation of the musical Broadway production based on the original 2004 movie, which in itself was an adaptation of some book, so there's a lot of layers to what's going on here. As shocking as it would be to believe, I hadn't seen the original film before watching this new version, so the second I got home from my screening, I spent about €4 and rented the thing off YouTube so I can properly evaluate this new version. I can't say the same as comparing this adaptation from its onstage musical counterpart, as I had never seen it and didn't get time to watch any bootlegs of it that are floating around somewhere on the internet. So I'm gonna judge this on its own to the best of my ability, but I will also be drawing some comparisons to the 2004 film and what I think this film does better and worse. Another thing that I found a bit baffling about this is that there's a majority of general audiences that are going into this film not knowing that it's a musical. For once, I'm not even going to blame the marketing for this, as it is made clear in the trailer that this film will have singing in it. And I guess some people could interpret that happening only once, but I feel like it should be obvious to people what they're getting into. Another more minor detail for eagle-eyed viewers is that the A in mean has a musical note in the letter, which should be a clear indication of it being a musical, or maybe that's just me. I just found it pretty funny when the film started, and I quietly hear some girl behind me whisper to a friend, "Is this a musical?" It's kind of wild, but I digress. Firstly, I want to say I appreciate how well this movie is shot. There's lots of moments in the cinematography that are complemented so well with the choreography of the musical numbers. Along with this, there's lots of lighting choices that get very creative in sequences. I particularly like the one that's set in Regina George's bedroom, as it's draped in a harsh red lighting, and considering the mood of the scene, it works really well. I thought a lot of acting in this film was done really well too. Angourie Rice does a good job at Katie in the first two acts of the film. However, I feel like the casting choice gets a little skewed as her character slips into becoming more mean. She just doesn't seem to be able to pull off the act, and it's not too believable, but overall she was good. Reneé Rapp was great too, which isn't a surprise as this role is second nature to her. She's been Regina George on the Broadway show since its run. On top of this, she has an incredible singing voice, and it's always a treat on the ears when musical numbers appear with her in it. Speaking of the musical numbers, I do have some mixed feelings. I can tell alone from their originals, these songs are catchy with some good lyrics and melodies, but after taking time to listen to a few in comparison to movie versions, I can't help but feel like most of them were kind of butchered. A lot of the instruments are substituted with a more sterile and pop music approach. One or two songs include a trap beat as well, which I wasn't particularly happy about. I feel like it's weird to make a musical and not embrace its standard instrumentation that people are familiar with. I guess it's an attempt to appeal to general audiences. If they hear these songs sounding like pop songs they would hear on the radio, maybe it would subconsciously make them want to buy the soundtrack to gain more money for the film. Along with this, I feel like the film runs into an inconsistency problem. It establishes early on that the musical numbers would have an aspect ratio when the rest of the film would be completely widescreened. However, very quickly this idea is abandoned as basically all the musical numbers stay in widescreen, which was weird. I don't know if this was a sign of laziness or carelessness, but it almost makes you question the point of doing it in the first place if this idea was just gonna be thrown out. I physically can't comment on the writing of this film, as it is fundamentally the same script as the original, nearly 90% verbatim. For obvious reasons, a lot of things had to be cut from this that were in the original. Like, looking back on it now, a considerably shocking amount of slurs were in the original. Obviously none are present here, which begs the question again of what's the point? I know they didn't include them because the internet would have a shitstorm, but I hate to break it to you, in using those words, yes, even now, it's more realistic to how high school students talk. I think that's my main problem with this film. It's very sterile and its edge is completely abandoned. There's basically little to no insults in this film, which is what added to the original's comedy. Questionable changes to lines like social suicide to social ruinous, like, seriously, what teenage girl would ever say those two words in the same sentence? It's really weird and takes away a lot of the impact of the original. That being said, I appreciate seeing a bit more development in this film. They delve slightly into the past of characters like Gretchen and Janice and their relationships with Regina and how deeply sad they are. I feel like this may have been the Broadway show's doing, since that show is 2.5 hours while this one barely scrapes 2 hours. Overall, this movie is a good time, but I believe this concept can't really work in a modern setting as much as they wanted to, and as much as they desperately want to push the TikTok angle in this version, along with loads of other product placement, which is really annoying to see. It's too sterile and has no bite to it. The songs are catchy but don't showcase truly how good they actually are for first time listeners. The film is almost a mess, but makes up for it in lots of areas that kept me engaged and entertained. I'm giving Mean Girls 2024 3.5 stars. It's nowhere near as great as the original film, but still has its moments to shine, where if you're unaware of its stage show, you can enjoy it, but as a remake, know that it doesn't offer anything incredibly exceptional, but is still entertaining regardless.